What's the difference between fit and feet, for example? Or ship and sheep?
Everything?
That's the easiest.
The writing, the pronunciation, and everything.
What's the difference in pronunciation?
One is short, one is long. Isn't it?
Okay, so say both words.
I know. That's with which word?
Something that floats on the water and an animal that looks like a cloud.
It looks like a cloud.
So both of them. So the thing that floats on the water.
Ice? what word? Float.
Totally lost.
I said the two words. An animal that's fluffy, it says bah.
Yeah.
And the other word that
Okay,
sounds.
yeah.
So the other one that
Sheep.
float, huh?
Sheep.
And
Sheep. I don't
okay, all right, okay. No,
know.
well, it's not that.
Sheep.
Okay,
Shit. Sheep.
right. The second one sounds really unnatural.
Yeah, because
It was.
it lasts too long. How
It lasts too long. That's the thing. Okay, it's a really big mistake. Remember, there are always at least two ways to interpret everything. Everything. Normally, there are two ways to interpret everything. So you said one is short and one is long. Okay? Which is kind of true. The problem with that is that most people interpret it in the incorrect way, where they say ship, sheep, and they make it unnaturally long because they're interpreting one is like this, the other is long. Now, imagine you've got these two distances, let's say, okay? There's two ways to interpret this, okay? Which is this one is longer than this one, or this one is shorter than this one. Now, this is really important because really what you think is that when you interpret that this one is longer than this one, you say ship, sheep, and you make it longer. So this is the normal one, this is the long one. But it's not like that, it's the opposite. This is normal and this one is really short. It's not that one is long, it's that one is really short. You see? So it's sheep, ship, ship. Yeah. Now, when you think about it like this, it's just the correct interpretation. And it's not your mistake, it's the mistake that we normally teach it. We say one is short and one is long. So you think, one's extra long. It's like, no. One is normal length, the other is super, super short. Okay? So really think of it as the thing that looks like the animal. The animal, what's that one?
Sheep.
Okay. And then the thing that floats on water?
Ship.
Ship. So the way I do it, the way I teach it is, imagine it in ship, the I doesn't exist. So the word is spelled S-H-P. How would you pronounce that? Okay, but you need voice.
Ship.
Ship. Okay, and the P? Put the P?
Ship.
Okay, good, much better. And then the other one is just normal length. Sheep.
Sheep.
Sheep. Now, fit.
Fit.
Yeah, fit. Fish.
Fish.
Yeah. Fit.
Fit.
Fish. 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 Fish.
Fish.
Okay, good. Pick.
Pig.
Pick. Pick.
Pig.
Okay, good. Peak.
Pig.
Yeah. Peak. Peak. Good. Now, when I teach it like this, automatically people understand and know how to do it and how to say it correctly, because it's not that one is long, it's that one is super short. And if you just imagine there is no vowel, automatically you start pronouncing it correctly. Because subconsciously you know that there is an I there, so you kind of make an I sound, but it's so short that you almost don't hear it. And that's really what it is, the I sound, I. It's very, very short. It's shorter than the length of a normal vowel. Now, E is just a normal one, I. So you see the I is extra short. But, well, that's the easy explanation. Now, for Spanish speakers, there's an easier explanation, which is you You don't have a problem saying the sheep, feet, peak, all of those ones, because it's the same sound as your E Latina. It's exactly the same. E, E, E. It's exactly the same. You have a problem saying the other ones, the short ones, because that vowel sound, the I, doesn't exist in Spanish. So you'll never, what I mean by this is that you'll never be saying the bad word.
Okay.
Yeah, because the bad words, because there are a couple, it's always using the shorter sound. So you'll never be misunderstood. And all the context will always tell the listener which one you're speaking about. If you're worried about somebody misunderstanding what you're saying or thinking you sound strange, if you make the vowel extra long, you're going to sound strange. So you're going to have that effect. So just don't get involved in that. Okay, cool. You got questions or doubts then?
Because this is
Well,
the meaning,
it's-
if I understood it correctly.
Yes, I mean, not exactly, because the person is saying it sounds improbable. Not necessarily I don't believe you, but what you're telling me sounds improbable. Either because it's an improbable thing, or because I don't believe you or trust you. But then you say, I'll have to take your word for it. You're making a conscious decision to believe you in spite of the existence of the improbability of what you're saying. So yes, you're basically right, but I'm quite a bit more specific, but yes.
But then, does it sound to you rude or an imposition, or how would you rephrase it in a different way to say the same? Because to me,
What
it
you're
sounds
saying
also-
sounds unlikely, but I'll believe you. So it sounds unlikely, but I'll believe you.
Okay. In both, in written and speaking.
Yes, I mean, somebody tells you something that sounds very unlikely or very improbable, but despite the improbability or the unlikelihood of it, you choose to accept and believe what they're saying. So you say, I'll have to take your word for it. So you're saying, it sounds unlikely to me, or it sounds improbable. It's not necessarily I don't trust you or I don't believe you. Just what you're saying sounds unlikely or sounds improbable. However, I choose to believe you and accept what you're saying.
Yeah, and I understand what you mean. It's with the future, and they have to. It's like you have the obligation to believe the person, but in some way you have already taken the decision of believing.
Well, when did you take? Well, okay, because the second question is that's the first general meaning of to take somebody's word for it. But then the other one is why did they use will? Okay. Now, so you said the person decided. When did the person decide to take their word for it?
In the past, when I'm telling you something, depicting a situation which has passed already.
But you can't decide in the past if I didn't know the situation.
It was decided in the past.
There's an action in the future, in fact, because you're saying for what when you do the action you have decided for, you're saying that in the past you would have done what the other person had said.
Imagine there's no glass of water, okay?
Okay.
And I say, "Ah, I'm really thirsty, and you want to help me, what would you say?
Shall I get you?
But you don't even ask a question, you just decide.
I will get you some water.
Yeah, exactly. When did you decide?
On the spot.
On the spot. It's that spontaneous decision. So, will is used for two things. It's used for general predictions, okay, about the future. Imagine you're looking at a crystal ball, they're just general predictions, or spontaneous decisions. Now, what is a spontaneous decision? A decision that you make at the moment of speaking. Now, it's normally in response to what somebody says, or in response to a present situation. For example, I'm thirsty, you decide, I'll get you a glass of water, okay? Or in your case, Nacho, I tell you something improbable and highly unbelievable, and you say, I'll have to take your word for it. You decided at the moment of speaking.
Super beautiful. What you just explained.
But what's the other purpose of using will?
Will is what we call general predictions.
Okay.
So a general prediction is a prediction based on your opinion. It's not based on... It's based, yeah, that's why we call them general predictions. It's just what you think. Now, what you think will happen may be different from what I think will happen.
Yeah.
And that's when we start to have an argument about the future of politics in Spain or something. Yeah, you say, this government, I think they'll make a pig's ear of it. And I say, well, I think they'll do quite well. They're both general predictions, but they're very different. One is based on your opinion, one is based on my opinion. So will is for predictions, general predictions. What is a general prediction? A prediction based on your opinion. And then for... So what you think will happen?
Tomorrow is it will rain. I'm looking at the sky, it will rain tomorrow.
And you say, I think it will rain tomorrow. So it's often combined with words like I think or
Okay.
I doubt or things like that because they express your opinion. And then for spontaneous decisions, which are decisions that you make at the moment of speaking. Now that's different in Spanish because in those ones you use presente, which is probably why it caught your eye and got your attention.
Is it as such an idiom?
What?
To take your word or to take my word?
To take your word for it.
For it.
To take somebody's word for it.
Okay, then as such is an idiom itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's a way, related to word. Word is about a promise or about truth, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And often we say, imagine you want to tell a person that they can believe you, you could say, you can take my word for it. And you often put your hand up like this, because this is the body language for, I'm innocent, I'm not lying. And you say, you can take my word for it, so you can believe me. Okay? Or you could say, you have my word.
That's the point, yeah.
You have my word, which is, I promise on my life almost. The word, a person's word is the ultimate promise, let's say. You have my word. So it's your promise of honor.
But it's the same translation in Spanish,
Yeah.
despite the fact that the difference is that we use present simple and they use future. Okay.
In that particular situation. But I'm not sure if it's a universal concept, but a person's word is, let's say it's their honor. So the person is gambling all of their reputation on what they're saying, which is a really serious thing, let's say. That's, I suppose, the origin of it. What does ought to mean? Forget that sentence, just ought to.
Like must, like
No.
no, like what?
Another modal verb, not must.
They have to.
No.
All the ones that imply shall.
What do you mean all the ones? There's only one per meaning.
They're similar. Okay, then I don't know.
Do you know? Ought to?
Ought to.
Ought to. It's the same as
Same as should.
should.
Okay, well, okay. It has a probability then. Okay.
It's not about probability. What's the meaning of should or ought to?
You have
Oh, okay. In
you
your
say
sentence.
that.
Oh, okay. In your sentence, it's more about probability.
Okay.
Or certainty. Let's say
Yeah.
you're expressing certainty.
Okay, let's start with whichever you think. Maybe
Okay.
with the ought to general, and then we go to the sentence. I don't know, or as you choose. I don't understand ought to. I don't never use it. I don't know how to use it.
Well, look, your
and
expression-
Then I see the sentence and it blows my mind.
Okay. Blows your mind. We'll look at that sentence in a moment because it's a fixed phrase. It is a fixed phrase, okay?
Okay.
But it's easy to see why it's that. I'll explain that in a moment. But should and ought to. Now, should is a modal verb, okay? Ought to, strictly speaking, is not a modal verb, but we use it like a modal verb. Just like must. Must is a modal verb. Now, the other word which has a similar meaning is have to, okay? Which strictly speaking isn't a modal verb, but we use it as a modal verb, okay? That's the first thing. So should and ought to, they have the same meaning, and typically we use it for advice, okay? To give advice. Now, what is advice? Advice is what you think is the correct thing to do. So if you say, my car is making a funny noise, I say, you should take it to a mechanic, or you ought to take it to a mechanic. There's no obligation there, it's purely advice. You can choose to ignore me if you want, but my advice, which means what I think is the correct thing to do, is take it to the mechanic, but you're free to do whatever you want. Yeah? That's the meaning of should and ought to. Now, the only difference between those is that should is always correct, ought to is really only spoken English. It's not more informal, it's spoken English. So we typically don't write ought to, okay? And the other thing is that in spoken English, some people say it and some people don't. So I don't say ought to. Not for any particular reason, I'm just not a person that says ought to. But maybe my best friend says ought to and not should when he speaks. Okay? So really, when you're speaking, you can choose both. They're totally fine, there's no difference in spoken English. But when you're writing, stick with should. Okay? Now,
So it's okay if I don't use ought. It's okay.
you never need to use it, because I don't. As long as you understand it.
It's enough. Okay. Understand it is enough. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, that should do it, or that ought to do it, which is your sentence, is more like a fixed phrase, which is, okay, imagine this table starts to rock, move from side to side, and I think, looks like there's a problem with one of the stands or one of the legs or something. And I get a piece of paper and I put it under the leg and I say, yeah, that ought to do it. That should do it. So meaning, I fixed it, problem solved. Yeah. Or I mean, imagine we're in a brainstorming session. We've got some problem in the company and we're trying to think of ideas to solve it. And we're bouncing ideas off each other and we're suggesting things. That's a bad idea, and you come up with something, you say, yeah, that's a good one, that should do it. That should solve the problem.
But you say should, or you say ought.
Or that ought to do it.
But would you say should?
You can say both.
Oh, you can say both. Okay, I thought the fixed phrase was with ought to.
No, should as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I only say should.
Okay, it's again, but here in this particular case, you can also choose what to say depending on your way of speaking.
I can't even think of a single expression where you can only use ought to.
Okay.
Spoken English, you can use both.
Okay.
Happen to is...
yes, we discussed that. Yes. Now.
Unexpectedly or... Okay, so it's often used in first conditionals. Okay? Imagine I say, imagine Mania's not here, and I say, if you see her before next class, tell her to do her homework or something. Okay? Now, that's just, if you see her, tell her this. Now, imagine that you tell me that she's gone away for a week and you're not going to see her. And I say, okay, but if you happen to see her, so if on the off chance, so it's very improbable, but let's just imagine, because it's still possible, if you do see her, tell her to do her homework. So happen to is, it emphasizes the improbability of something. Now, in your situation, so it talks about unexpected or very improbable, but also very lucky. So, imagine I say, my car's just broken down, I've decided to get a new one. What I would like is a very old Fiat from 1963, a red one. And you say, oh, my friend happens to have that car and he's looking to sell it. I say, wow, fantastic. How much does he want for it? So happens to is, this is very lucky and very fortunate. So when a person happens to do something or happens to have something, you're saying this is very fortunate that the person has it. So it's most commonly used in two different situations, and slightly different meaning. Well, it's the same meaning, but two different situations. In a first conditional, if you happen to, or if somebody happens to do something, meaning it's probably not going to happen, but if it does, let's just imagine it does. So it's like an improbable first conditional. Or in normal sentences, somebody happens to know the answer to this question. So it's very unlikely, but we're very lucky because this person knows. So to talk about the improbable nature or the very fortunate nature of a person.
I've heard this more than once. To call in sick, is it fixed, right, or fixed? Or I don't understand the literal meaning. Well, I don't know why this preposition, or is it fixed? To call in
Okay, well, to call in sick, where are you calling?
work. You're
Work.
calling to your work to
To
say.
no, you're calling work.
Oh, you're calling work to say you're sick.
Yes, exactly. So to call in is to call.
Makes no sense.
And then I'm trying to think of other situations.
Wait.
To call in sick is always going to be to call work to tell them that you're ill. Yeah. Imagine we're going to Barcelona at the weekend, okay, which is tomorrow and the next day. And I say, look, if it rains in Barcelona, we will have to make plans to stay indoors. And you say, no, I've looked at the weather forecast, it's wall-to-wall sunshine every day. I say, okay, but if it were to rain, we would need to do something indoors. Which is like, it's not going to happen, but let's just imagine that it happens. So it's actually between the first and the second. It's like an extremely unlikely first conditional, but it's grammatically a second conditional because it follows the past with would. Does that make sense?
Sentence. Do you really think so? But when speaking, you really think so? Okay, so do you do this? Is it common? Should we say it? Not because we are not non-natives. It is just slang. It's okay. Acceptable.
I use it.
Okay. Only with thinking. It's. You never.
I use it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, with my friends. A lot.
Yeah.
And it's for only in spoken English. Yeah.
Are you thinking whether you ever say maybe do you say do or does in that question?
Well, this is what I'm
Thinking.
Yeah.
Maybe you.
Which
you
ones?
didn't say at all.
When they're. I mean, it's only with the do, be, and have auxiliaries. So it could be, where are you going? Instead of, where are you going? What are you doing? How are you doing? What do you do? And that could be, what do you do? Could be, what do you do? Or what did you do? Where'd you go? Well, the do becomes just an apostrophe D. You know what I mean? That's probably the most common one.
Come on, but this changes everything.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, this is... In American English, they omit the do, have, and be most of the time, I would say, in informal spoken English situations. And even in American English, even some formal situations, they would, in spoken English, they would omit it as well. And in British English, there are people that never omit it, My mother would always say every auxiliary verb, always, no exception.
All right.
But I omit them quite a lot. So in informal spoken situations, I would omit them a lot. Should you do it? I'd be careful. I'd be careful. It's one of the, because strictly speaking, it's not correct. It's not correct. And if you don't do it correctly, it will sound very shocking, or at least get people's attentions quite a lot. You don't need to do it. What's important is you need to understand it.